I let you live. And you wasted it.
Welcome back to another Last of Us breakdown where we're going to be going over the final episode of Season 2, Episode 7, going over those game changes and how they kept some of the stuff in, but also talking about some of those added scenes and what they did differently. So we're going to go through the start of the episode and go all the way to the end, so let's jump into it. So the episode starts off with Jesse taking the arrow out of Dina's leg, and Dina refusing to take any kind of whiskey. And that's because she's pregnant, which comes around later where Jesse puts 2 and 2 together because Dina was acting a little strangely, where she was saying she has to live and that she wouldn't take that whiskey, only pointing to one thing, that she was pregnant with Jesse's child. Now, this scene was interesting because we had to get the resolution from 2 episodes ago where she got shot in the leg. So I do like that they kept that in. It keeps the continuity. So that's good. And then when Ellie does come back, she goes to see Dina. Now in the game, that also happens. Once she gets back from killing Nora, she goes to see Dina. However, they added a lot more conversation than the game did. Now in the game, we do have Ellie getting the blood rubbed off her because she's just covered in it. However, in the game, she just gives up a little bit of information. She says, I made her talk, and then says, I don't want to lose you. While Dina's comforting her, clearly she's traumatized from what she just did to Nora. And they kind of do the same here. However, Ellie talks a lot more, where here we have Ellie also still being traumatized from that experience for making Nora talk, but I will say Bella Ramsey's face looked more like a dead stare than traumatized, like being traumatized and showing that emotion. I think even though it was a game, had that better face structure to show the pain she was feeling, where I feel like Bella Ramsey was like this shell shock and this just dead stare like, I don't know what I just did, like she's traumatized. But I do like the game emotion a little bit more, and I do kind of wish that Bella put a little bit more emotion into it, because I feel like we're missing something.
Especially because we know she could do that emotional scenes, because we've seen it in this episode when she's yelling at Jesse and different moments throughout it as well. Like after she kills Mel. Like we see Bella Ramsey being able to do these really emotional scenes, but in this scene they kind of took out some of that emotion.
However, the different way they were doing it still worked to an extent, and it still showed her being traumatized from the experience she just went through. However, unlike the game, she explains everything about the Fireflies and Joel, and about how Joel killed Abby's father. Now, in the game, they don't explicitly say this. They don't really tell us if she ever told Dina, and if she did, it's kind of like half-truths, not the full truth. So it's interesting that they put this in here, and honestly, they are doing a lot of scenes where they're just dumping this info for other characters, just for them to have the info. And I will say in the game as well, Dina's a lot more comforting to Ellie. She's like hugging her, she's comforting her, trying to like make her feel better after what she just went through. However, here, Dina seems distant, she's sitting back, and I don't know, it just doesn't, I feel like it doesn't work as well. I think there should have been more of that close bondness, as she should have been holding Ellie to like comfort her for what just happened. I feel like this scene wasn't exactly a hit compared to what they did before. However, having a little bit more conversation isn't a bad thing, because I do feel like they had very little in the game. However, I do like that we had Dina turning around saying, well, she got what she deserved, but I don't know why they had Ellie say, well, maybe she didn't. Because I feel like she did get what she deserved. Like, Abby and her friends came and tortured Joel, killed him, took him out, and did it in front of Ellie. Like, I think they deserve that. I mean, Abby was the one that did everything, but Nora and them were participants because they were there. Dina being the one saying this is really interesting, because it really shows that Dina has more rage in her than Ellie, and they kind of did it throughout the season, other than the Ellie versus Nora scene. And that's kind of like my biggest problem right now with the show, is that Ellie is not the Ellie I know from the game, and I feel like she needs that anger, that rage, that need for revenge, and they really didn't have it throughout the season. However, I will say they gave us a scene from the game that actually comes way earlier than the moment we got here, where when Dina gives her the bracelets for good luck, she actually gives Ellie that in the game before she goes off on her first run after they first get to the theater, after she calls Dina a burden because of the pregnancy and all that. So now we finally got that, which I do like that they put this in here, because it is a nice little scene between the two characters, and Dina showing her how she cares for Ellie. And also, one of my favorite things from this episode is that Jesse confirms that Shimmer is still alive. Definitely a better fate than what happened in the video game where Shimmer gets blown up. I'm glad that Shimmer survived and is just chilling out in that music store. Like, good. Shimmer's not dead. I'm happy they didn't kill the horse. So, glad to see that. However, Jesse's explanation about how he got there was really interesting. How he kind of followed their tracks, found Shimmer, and then followed their tracks that way, which is interesting to say the least. I do think they should still have done it how they did in the game, where Jesse just kind of stumbles upon Ellie when she's going against the wolves, because I feel like that would have been a more natural way to find her, while Jesse is out there in Seattle looking for Ellie and Dina, and he finds her coincidentally, rather than him just appearing out of nowhere and saving them from the stalkers. Now, this is where Jesse starts to figure out that Ellie and Dina have a little bit more of a connection than they did, where Dina's telling Ellie stuff that she never told Jesse, like the fact that she was pregnant, and he only put this together because of the whiskey, and how she was saying that she needed it to survive. Now, I thought this was interesting because in the game, Jesse was also kind of figuring out that Dina was pregnant, because he was realizing that she wasn't able to keep anything up at night. She was kind of getting sick, and he kind of puts two and two together that she is pregnant. However, the way they did these lines are completely different from the game as well, because Jesse and Ellie are doing it in the theater. Ellie's saying to Jesse that she could take Dina back to Jackson, but Jesse knows that Dina won't go without Ellie, setting up all of that. But the way they kind of put it here is where Jesse's more angry at Ellie than anything. That they're in the situation, that she went even though she wasn't supposed to go, which is a complete 180 from the game, because in the game, Jesse does tell her, hey, if you asked me, I would have came along. They're kind of making Jesse more of a leader here and making him be the one to say what's up and be like, hey, this isn't right. We have to go back. You're just going to get yourself killed. He's watching out for his friends. But I do like Game Jesse, where Game Jesse was like, okay, I'll go. I'm going to help my friends. I'm going to protect them while also helping them achieve their goal. Where in this one, he's definitely against that. And now that he knows he's going to be a father, he's even more pissed. However, they definitely foreshadowed that line where he's like, I can't die. I'm going to have a kid. And I knew what was going to happen because I played the game. And of course, he just dies by the end of the episode by getting blasted. But they just had to put that line in there to make it hurt so much more. And I will say that was a good line. It's kind of the part where Ellie's supposed to be angry, where she called Dina a burden for being pregnant because she's not supposed to be there. Now, there's two lives at risk rather than just one. And I like that Jesse did take that kind of father role and say, hey, this isn't right. Dina shouldn't be here because she's pregnant. She has my kid. There's no way she should be doing this. And I think he's the only one that's kind of thinking clearly, and his anger is appropriate for the situation they're in. Even though Jesse kind of did feel like a dick here, he did feel like he had the anger that Ellie should have been having. Now in the game too, they talk about the aquarium because she got that information from Nora, where in the show we have the information that she found about the wheel and the marina. So there's just a little bit of different information there, but they're still getting the pieces put together rather than just saying they're at the aquarium. So they have the lines in there to kind of tease what's coming, and it still worked. And I didn't mind the Jesse and Ellie scene. I do like what they did, but just to show Jesse being kind of frustrated with what's going on. Even though I still think he should have been okay with being there, but he was just mad that Dina was there. I feel like that makes more sense rather than him being angry that he's there as well. Now, we did see in this episode, like I said before, Ellie telling Dina about what Joel did. Now, in the game, she tells Jesse about what happened, but very vaguely, about how Joel was a smuggler, he got into a disagreement with the Fireflies, and it ended up with some of them dying. So a completely different story than what really happened. However, it does set up the stakes for Jesse about what's going on, and he's the first one that she really talks about the hospital with. Not Dina, it was Jesse. So it's really interesting to see that they never actually put that conversation in there, because I feel like it would have probably helped a little bit. However, they did cut out a lot of stuff from the game where during the scene where we're with Jesse and Ellie, they do go against some wolves because they run into them while they're scouting the area. And I feel like this would have been a perfect place in the show to have some actual conflict with the enemy, taking them down and fighting, having some actual stakes being risen where they have to worry about the wolves and try to get around them, rather than just seeing the one scene of Ellie wanting to go try to save the one Scar kid. Because in the game, you're the player, you're most likely lighting them all up, but it's completely different when you're watching a TV show where they're going to have to make their decisions for themselves and go there. But I would have liked to see some action between the wolves and Jesse and Ellie, rather than just them going past them and then not seeing any more of them after that. But we did have another scene of Dixon in this episode, kind of just teasing what's going on with him setting up Abby as a leader and how she's just left the wolves, which is all just setting up her story for next season and why she leaves the wolves. We'll learn about that next season and what's going on with her character, what she was doing in Seattle during the time frame of Ellie being there, which they did lay the groundwork here for a couple different moments. I don't think there was too much of a point of the scene. I feel like they could have cut it and just focused more on Jesse and Ellie, and then we could have dove into that scene specifically with Dixon in season 3. But back to Ellie and Jesse, we did have them going to the bookstore that had the mushrooms everywhere, just like how it does in the video game. However, this is where they were supposed to meet up with Tommy, so I do like how they added that little scene in there. They stole something from the video game. It was pretty cool. And we also learned some more information about Jesse, which we never actually got in the game. And I think there was a good dialogue to add, just kind of showing what Jesse and Dina mean to each other, where Jesse is talking about how he loves Dina, but not in the romantic way anymore. It's more of loving and caring as a friend, and I do like how they put that in there, because it's showing his character caring about his friends, and it gave us more time with Jesse that we never really got in the game. Jesse talking about the girl that came into town with one of the groups from Alberta. They talk about how the girl wanted him to go with her because they were falling in love, and it was all this nice story, and then it turned into him oh, I never left because I have a sense of community. I want to protect the community, and I'm supposed to be the next Maria. Really setting him up for what he meant to Jackson, what was really going to go with him, and what he was going to turn into later down the road. Which, again, was something we never got in the game, because we never really got a lot with the Jackson community. We were kind of there, and then we were gone. We never really did much there. So I do like the added scenes to an extent. Like, of course, there was some stuff I wasn't a big fan of. Getting a little context to where they were from and how they were dealing with their community was interesting. Especially because they dropped that line later with Ellie and Jesse, which we will be talking about in a moment. However, first, we gotta talk about how they heard on the radio about Tommy being that sniper and how the wolves were looking into him. Which is similar to the game. When Jesse and Ellie were kind of going around avoiding the wolves, they did hear the wolves talking about the sniper taking people out. Then this is where we got the point in the game where they split off. Same thing, had a similar conversation for a couple lines. However, this conversation was a lot different because Jesse turns around and says that he voted no to let Ellie go. Which, again, in the game, he said he would go with them if they asked. So it's like such a big change up from the character, because it wasn't something he would do. And they were setting him up to be like the next leader and the next kind of Remuria for the community, which was interesting because we never really got a lot in the community with them dealing with like procedural stuff and everything other than the one voting scene. It does feel weird to have this in there. I feel like it's another thing they could have probably removed. However, I feel like they were just setting it up so Ellie could say,
"Fuck the community!" My community was beaten to death in front of me while I was forced to fucking watch.
So I think that moment right there was what the whole community stuff was setting up. Jesse voting no, having more of the political side of it, just so that Ellie could say, fuck the community, I want my revenge, which is something I think is perfect. That's like something I would want to see Ellie say, because that's exactly what she's doing here, right? She's here to go after the people that killed Joel, and I think that was a great line to put in there, and I thought it was a great moment as well. And they still kept the Jesse line saying, I really hope you make it, because I like that. You know, they're splitting off to do two different things. You know, in the game, they still had some of the similar conversation, with like Ellie saying that Tommy would want her to go after Abby. He can handle it on his own. Like, having those moments were great because it still kind of kept that game moment stuff in there, but also added more so that Ellie could have her rage come out and the stuff we've wanted to see from this character where she wants to get this revenge. So I do like how they did that. However, they cut up with a lot of stuff from the game because after that moment in the game, she goes on her own adventure with the boat, takes out wolves, takes out scars. Like, we do our own little encounters dealing with stuff, which again, I do wish they had more encounters in the show. Like, just having Ellie be a survivor, sneak around wolves, maybe take a few out, and have a little bit more action with this apocalypse show, rather than just kind of cutting to the major cutscenes. I think it would have been nice to see a little bit more interaction with the enemies and actually taking them out, and being more of that bloodthirsty Ellie, rather than just kind of teleporting to different places here and there. However, I will say, I am glad that when it came to going to the aquarium, she took the boat there, and it wasn't just teleporting to the aquarium like they did with the hospital and Nora, and gave us more of that moment of her sneaking in. Because that's really important, because that's exactly what you do in the game. But the one thing we don't do in the game is once the boat capsizes, you don't end up on the island, you end up swimming to the aquarium. Like, that makes sense. But instead, they put this pointless scene in with the Scar Island, Ellie about to get killed, and then they just drop her and you're like, you know what? We gotta go deal with our village being attacked. We're gonna leave you, woman with all your weapons, here, so you can just do whatever you want, rather than just killing you right there and then. Now, this scene was just here to set up Season 3, with Abby being on that island, with the wolf soldiers going after the Scars, and setting up the war that's going on there. But, like, I just don't understand the point of the scene, because Ellie does not go to the island in the game whatsoever, so it felt like a very pointless, random scene to put in there, where they could have spent more time on other characters like Ellie and Jesse, or dealing with other wolves when Ellie and Jesse were going around, or putting more time into the aquarium. But instead, we have a random scene and then we go past it. So, really weird choice, and I don't know why they did that. However, when we do get to the aquarium, she's sneaking around, we do get to see a little portion of the area that has bandages and blood around there, which is a tight tease to the game as well. A nice set design choice that teases something for Abby's story, which I thought was cool that they kept it in there. However, there is one thing I'm glad they took out of this, and that's in the game, Ellie takes out their dog. She falls in, dog attacks her, she kills it. But in this, they take out that whole scene, and as someone who owns a dog, I'm happy, because it was hard to do. I did not want to kill their dog, and I'm glad that they took it out, because it's something I'm okay, we don't need it, and it's not too important to the story. It's just more of like a gut punch when you know who that dog is. But now we get to the point of Ellie confronting Mel and Owen, which started very similar to the game, where she comes in, starts asking them where Abby is, and asks them to point to the map, and she does it and says they have to point to the same place, or she'll kill one of them. But the thing is, in the game, it makes a lot more sense, because there's an earlier scene where Tommy had tortured two of the wolf soldiers, one of them being Abby's friend, killed both of them, but he had tortured them to get them to give them the same information by writing it down to prove that they weren't lying, which is where she got this idea from. Now, without that being there, this is kind of just a interesting part to put there. But at the same time, in the game, you have a map you're using when you're running around. But Ellie didn't have a map here. She didn't use a map whatsoever. Instead, we jump right into Owen trying to grab a gun, Ellie shooting him and accidentally killing Mel. Which in the game, that's not how it goes down whatsoever. Mel comes up, points to the map, and then Owen comes up, tries to take out Ellie. They fight, she shoots him, Mel tries to stab her, then she stabs Mel, and then realizes that Mel is pregnant. And she's horrified of what she just did because of Dina being pregnant. It's something she realizes, well, this could happen to Dina, and she's terrified because of it. And she's also traumatized because she went there not wanting to kill them. Because after what she did to Nora, I feel like she was also scared of herself. She was scared of what she might do, and she didn't want to turn into this full monster. She's kind of coming into that realization now for what she's doing after she beat Nora to death, just like how Abby beat Joel to death. So it's a really interesting scene in the game to see how they did it. But in this, they wanted to add an extra layer to everything by having Mel just reveal she's pregnant and telling her to cut her open to get the baby out, which honestly is horrifying in its own way. Like, it's a really devastating scene. I'm not the biggest fan of it, mostly because I didn't like how Mel just opened her things and start cutting it out. It was just like a weird scene, I think. I would have rather had her tussle with the knife, go after her, Ellie stab her, and maybe do it that way, rather than it being a shot through the neck to Owen and then killing Mel as well. But they still had the scene of both Jesse and Tommy coming in and getting Ellie out of there, so I do like how they kept some of the stuff in there. I just think the aquarium stuff wasn't done the best way. I feel like it could have been dealt with a little bit more, having a little bit more of that conversation, having Mel come up to try to point to the map, having Owen try to stop her, and then just having it be more of a tussle where she didn't want to kill them right away, but then they forced her hand and she had to do it. So I think it would have been better going that way, but they really wanted to throw in the traumatizing section of having Ellie almost cut out the baby out of Mel, which again is kind of crazy. But the biggest problem in this scene though is the fact that in the game, Ellie has the map and she drops the map before she leaves, and because she's so traumatized about what just happened, she doesn't pick up the map and they leave it there, which is how Abby's able to find out where the theater is, and that's how she's able to track them down. Now the biggest question is now with the show and Abby getting there is, how did Abby find them? Because in the game, she has a map. In this, she has no map. So how did she even possibly figure that out unless she was arriving at the aquarium right as they were leaving and followed them back? But at the same time, she arrives later than they did, so it honestly doesn't make a lot of sense. And now we're gonna have to wait like 2 years to see what they changed from the story to have Abby figure out where they were so that they could go there. Because now we have to wait until the end of season 3 to get to that moment of Abby shooting Jesse and going after Ellie. So that's gonna be a fun wait. But we will see, because they already changed something, and I don't know how it's gonna play out because they took out a key piece of information that led Abby there. But now we're back at the theater with everyone, and in the game, it starts off with Ellie and Dina laying together and Ellie seeing her and then getting up to go see Tommy and Jesse. So they have a very different moment here where they're together, and I don't understand why they didn't keep that little moment, because it is a nice moment between the two characters before she goes and talks to Tommy and Jesse. But instead with the show, she just goes straight into talking to them and overhearing them talking about how they're going to get back to Jackson. And the conversation in the game is a lot longer about how they're going to do it, going through different areas, talking about there being snow, and trying to find the best route possible and safely to get back to the town without being hurt. And they changed up a few things too. Tommy's a little bit more cold-hearted by saying, hey, they got what they deserved, because they killed his brother, so they got what they deserved, and that's exactly how he feels about it. He's more of a monster as well. But in this, he says they were part of it too. Kind of the same thing in a way, but I think the they deserved it was a little bit more of a cold line, where he's understanding what happened and why they deserve to die. Where in this, he's like, well, they're part of it. So, you know, they kind of made their choices when they joined in with Abby to take down Joel. However, they still kept the part where they had to be okay with letting Abby live because they had to go home. They couldn't stay out any longer and they had to get back safely. So I still like that they kept that in there because, of course, then leads to the devastating scene of Abby finding them. And Ellie and Jesse's convo was also very different from the game as well, because in the game, one of the lines Jesse says is, my friend's problems are my problems, because he's there for his friends. He's going to help them no matter what. Where in this, it feels more of like a meaningful conversation between two friends. And how Jesse understands that Ellie would have set the world on fire to save him, which I do like this conversation, even though it kind of backtracks what he said earlier this episode, where he was calling Ellie impulsive and kind of only thinking about herself. Like, it kind of goes back on all of that, but then he kind of realizes throughout this episode that no matter what, if anything bad happened to him, Ellie would just tear shit up to help him out. So I do like this conversation between the two friends. It adds a lot more to their characters, and also just adds more impact to his death once they hear the gunshot go off and Jesse runs through and gets blasted in the face by Abby. Which I will say, when I played the game and that happened, it was one of the most shocking moments from the game because I was not expecting it. It was just like, you're running in, oh my god, what's going on? And then boom, Jesse's dead. I feel like in this, they give a lot more character development to Jesse, which I do like. And I think they did a decent job with his character, even though there were lines I wasn't a big fan of.
Which those lines were definitely him sounding more like an ass, and he was being more of a dick to Ellie. I didn't like that.
I still enjoyed majority of it and what they did with him. However, with Abby showing up, we did get a lot of the same dialogue from the game, which I really liked. They kept the scene almost shot for shot, and it was great. I freaking loved how they did it, especially with Caitlin Dever's like performance as Abby. She did such a great job, and honestly, I think she's going to carry next season. The show has kind of been up in the air for me. Like, there's been a lot of moments I did not like. However, Caitlin Dever has been doing it for the few scenes she's in the season, did a great job as Abby. And I feel like because Abby's journey is different from Ellie's, and there's a lot more action and stuff going on in there with like the scars and the wolves, I'm very interested to see how they're going to do it next season and how they're going to do it, because I think Caitlin Dever will just do a fantastic job. Even if there's shitty dialogue, I think she's still going to do a great job, and I want to see it. And I want to see how she does it. Now, there's only one line during this interaction that's different from the game, and that's where Ellie says,
I was looking for you. I didn't mean to hurt them.
in the game, she's pretty much dead set on killing all of them. She's going to take them out if she runs into them. But after Nora's death, she does get traumatized from what she did and what happened, because she beat Nora to death in the spore-filled area. So it's like something that traumatized her, which is why she didn't want to kill Owen and Mel at first, because she just did like this very traumatic death. Now she's like, okay, you know, I don't want to do this. I don't want to push myself to be a monster. But then when push came to shove and they intervened and tried to kill her, there was only one other choice, and she fought back to save her own life. So it really shows you like what her character was. But in this, they're really showing it that, like, you know, she's not really a bloodthirsty monster. She just wanted to kill Abby, which is not true. She wanted to kill them at all at first. So it's interesting that they put this in here, but I am glad that they kept a lot of the same dialogue about how Ellie, she knows what Joel did, like, and trying to reason with her to understand what's going on. So I'm very interested in seeing how they're going to portray it when we get to Abby's side of things next season, because we're not going to see the resolution to this scene where Abby pulls the trigger until probably the very end of season 3. But again, the biggest problem with this scene is that her showing up without a map really begs the question to how the hell did she even get there to begin with. So we will see what happens next season. And we did get a little tease for next season as well, with Manny waking her up and her going to look at the wolf base and just seeing the setup for their compound. And that's pretty much it, because now the next season will start off with her. We'll get her flashbacks. We'll go through her story, what she's doing through Seattle day 1 through 3, and kind of going on from there, which I am very curious to see what's going to happen, because there is a lot of brutal fights in her side of the story, and I'm kind of curious to see how they're going to have Caitlin Dever portraying it. And it's going to be cool. I'm hoping it's going to be cool. I really hope they take any of the complaints we did from this season and kind of put it into the next one, even though I know a lot of people are most likely going to drop this show because of it focusing only on Abby next season and not Ellie, which honestly makes a lot of sense, because in the game, a lot of people were not happy about playing Abby after what she did to Joel. So it's going to be interesting to see the change up for people on the show compared to the game, and like how people are going to view the show differently. But overall, the episode wasn't terrible. I feel like it was a little weaker than some of the other ones this season, only because they cut out a lot of stuff that happened in between, just like the different interactions with the wolves and the scars and having those encounters. Like, I feel like it would have benefited from having at least one fight throughout the episode, just to show some action and kind of show what is like an apocalypse, dealing with them being in the middle of this like war zone between the two factions. And I feel like they kind of missed out by doing that. Also, I feel like we didn't get any infected for a couple episodes, so it's kind of disappointing for that as well. We got the stalkers, we only had those in that one episode. Then we had the train one, like we never really got them going against infected like properly, other than episode 2. So that's like my biggest disappointment so far, is because like I would have liked to see a little bit more of it, because there's a lot of different infected encounters in the game, and I would have liked to seen at least one of them. Like, there's one in the game where Ellie's starting to go on her own after she leaves Jesse. She's making her way to the aquarium, and she runs into a bloater after falling through a floor into an arcade, which was a pretty gruesome scene, because the bloater is eating one of the scars. And it's like, okay, hey, we could have had this here. Give us a cool scene with an infected where Ellie has to take him on by herself, and we could have got her being more of a survivalist, taking stuff on and being able to do stuff by herself, rather than her seeming like she doesn't know how to do anything. And that's also another big problem. They made her seem really weak and like not knowing how to do much, where I think we needed to show more of that standalone Ellie who could do stuff on her own. She's strong by herself, but they didn't really show that, and I am disappointed from that. The season isn't a write-off. There's still a lot of good moments, even though there are like really cheesy dialogues throughout. But like, I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I have a really mixed bag, and I think I might have to rewatch it again just to be like, okay, do I hate this? Do I like this? How do I really feel about this at the end of the day? And speaking of that, I will be making a video on The Last of Us Season 2 as a whole, the good and the bad, and that'll be coming out this weekend or early next week. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But let me know if you like this video. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, helps out the channel a lot, and you get to stay up to date with all my Marvel, DC, Last of Us, and other types of breakdowns. Let me know what you thought about this episode, what you liked, what you didn't, and we'll talk about in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later when it's time to break down another TV series or movie.